Well, everybody take a deep breath out there and say, thank goodness. There you go. A sigh of relief as Paul George, at least for right now, will be reevaluated next week in approximately 1 week due to the knee bruise now that he has a bone bruise in his knee after being checked out by the doctors later on Tuesday. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers pregame presented by Coors Light. We have Sixers Nets Game 5 of the preseason alongside Roy Burton. I'm Devon Givens. Brianna here with us as always. You there in the chat as we get ready for this game. But as we start off, we know the biggest story is, in fact, Paul George. The latest news on all of that. Again, as per the team, evaluated and will be reevaluated once again in approximately 1 week due to a bone bruise in his left knee sustained in the game on Monday night against the Atlanta Hawks in the victory, left in the second quarter, did not return in the second half because the way his knee hyperextended, it did not look good. But for what we saw, for what we now know, at least for right now, Roy, it sounds pretty good for the Sixers.
It sounds, yeah, like you said, a sigh of relief from every Sixers fan out there, because I know when I saw it, it didn't look good. And, and as a bunch of you out there in the chat, I know everybody becomes Twitter doctors, becomes social media doctors when all this stuff kind of happens. So you see that, and you was like, oh my God, did he tear an ACL? Did he hyperextend his knee? So we all think the worst because we've been through the worst. Like we've seen 2 years of Joel Embiid missing because he's injuries. We saw the Ben Simmons stepping on Sean Long's foot, at the end of training camp, missing his rookie year. So we've seen all this stuff. We've seen all these bad things happen to Sixers players over the years. So we expected the worst. And you know what? I will take a bone bruise and a 1 week evaluation. And again, I'm okay if he even misses a week into the regular season, because I'm sure he probably won't play opening night. But
right.
I'll take what we can get right now based on what we saw on Monday against the Hawks.
Yeah. So how were you in the moment, though? As you said, we all become doctors. We think all the things about the ACL, some other, maybe some ligament damage in there. But in the moment, how were you? Because we know how people tend to react to stuff like this, especially with this organization in this city.
Right. No, this is what I was saying. Again, this is why we can't have nice things. It's like once again, it's like you think everything is fine. And again, we had already digested the Joel Embiid, not going to play back-to-back news and all that stuff. So it's like, all right, we have gotten that out of our system. We were prepared to go into the season knowing that, our star players weren't all going to play 82 games together for the season. That's fine. That's okay. But then as soon as we got that news, as soon as we got through that news, again, you saw Joel and, Paul George's leg bend in a way that legs aren't designed to bend.
Yep.
And it's like, you got to be kidding me, man. It's like, after the Joel Embiid news, after what we saw with the Philadelphia Phillies, it's like, look, give me something. Like, can I have just 1 week apiece? Just 1 week apiece. I'm not asking for much, but as a Sixers fan, as a Philadelphia sports fan, I would just like 1 week where I don't have to worry about injuries or disappointments or things like that. And in the moment, I kind of got caught off guard. I'm not going to lie, but again, given the news that we got about the bone bruise and the reevaluation early next week, I think knock on wood, that's as good a news as we could have gotten.
So. Yes, and of course, in the moment we were all like, man, here we go. Not trying to overreact, but here we go again. The one good part that obviously you said was at least they don't have to worry about it later in the season.
Sure.
It's preseason. There is, at the time, there were 9 days before they have to throw the ball up for the home opener against the Milwaukee Bucks a week from today. So with that, it's early. And if he does miss, let's say the first week and a half, they have 3 games, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. And then the next game is not until Wednesday against the Detroit Pistons. Okay. So at that time, look, we're talking about maybe 4 games that he would potentially have to miss. And even though Joel Embiid has not played in the postseason and we got the update on what his future may look like for this campaign, we don't know that he's not going to play in any of those first 4 games as well. And if we're to look at this depth, and the improvement of Tyrese Maxey from year 4 to year 5, and think that he is that guy that can carry the load at least early on in the season as well, then you have a good coach, you have a really good team, you have an all-star still leading the way. Sure, the defense is going to shift differently, but Tyrese Maxey has talked about getting the experience and gaining that experience from last season, having to be in that role when Joel Embiid went out. Also doing so when Joel Embiid was on the floor for the postseason, injured, and being shorthanded and still going out there and doing enough to help win games. The question would be, would everyone else be able to help out and contribute in those games to pick up those victories. So that is key, that it is early, that if you're going to deal with it right now.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like you want to make sure, not that you want to make sure, but you want these guys to get, reps under fire, when they don't have a Paul George to lean on, when they don't have a Joel Embiid to lean on, because quite frankly, there's going to be, some games in February, some games in March where both of those guys won't be around, whether it's injuries or whatever have you.
Load management.
Yeah, exactly. Load management. Whatever have. Like, those guys won't be around. So, so it's good for, let's say Paul George misses the first week of the season. I think this is good. And again, you don't want to, I don't say throw games or whatever. You don't want to lose games early on, but you want to be in a spot where, okay, let's see what Gershon Yabusele does, with extended time. Let's see what KJ Martin does with extended time. Because again, there's going to be those games late in the season where they're going to have to get extended time in games where you're going to need for playoff positioning. So let's get those, bullets under fire quick, in October, November, so those guys will be ready come, February and March.
Also, I do want to talk about the bone bruise because it's not nothing. And I'll say this, as you all know out there, I am the king of injuries.
Mr. Rothman right here?
Yes, exactly. Mr. Rothman here. We'll talk about them a little bit later. But I am the king of injuries. Well, of course, you guys know about my ACL and my Achilles. But I also, I remember because Mo Spates was here.
Okay.
This is a while ago.
Wow.
Mo Spates, yeah, Mo Spates. Shout out Mo Spates. He was a good dude to cover during that time with the team. Funny as ever. So I had a bone bruise in my foot and my ankle. Because playing basketball, of course, everybody, if Al was out there, he'd be like, Devon, I told you to stop. Same thing for Winona. Devon, I told you to stop playing ball. Well, this was like 10 years ago, so it's all good. But I had a bone bruise in my ankle from playing ball. Sprained my ankle. I thought it was a typical sprain, no big deal. Maybe high ankle sprain, having to deal with that. When I got the x-ray, ankle sprain. When I got the MRI, no, you have a bone bruise. So what the doctor had told me at the time was, I wish you would have broken your ankle.
Really?
Because a bone bruise goes deep. It's not fully broken, but it's deep enough where your bone is messed up, where the doctor wished, because of the cast, being able to put the cast, you can put the cast on to heal it. I had an air cast. I didn't have a regular cast for the ankle. Yeah. So the doctor simply said, I wish you would have broken your ankle because you would have healed much faster with that injury. Now, I'm not saying his is as deep as mine or as bad as mine, but I just want to make everybody aware of what a bone bruise is. Now, mine was in the ankle and not my knee. My knee, when I did that, I've done other things to my knee. The worst clearly was the ACL that I tore in 2019. But when the bone bruise thing happened and the doctor said that, I was like, really? Are you serious? And he's like, yeah. And he broke it all down, explained it. And I can't get into the detail just because I don't remember everything that the doctor said at that time, except for the main part of which is, I wish you would have broken it, and then sticking me in the air cast for weeks until my injury happened. And I bring up Mo Spates because I remember walking into the locker room one day, and Mo Spates he and Royale Ivy, as a matter of fact, start laughing at me because I had the boot on. We made a joke. Still cool with Royale to this day. Seen him with the Brooklyn Nets at the time when Mikal was there, and now with the Houston Rockets. That's my guy. Mo Spates, same thing. But I remember that specifically of the time around it, the time it was around, because they were here. They made a joke in the locker room about me walking around in that boot, and that's what it is. So again, I bring that up to talk about how serious it is. Yeah. There's seriousness behind a bone bruise. He is a pro athlete. He is going to have around-the-clock treatment and all of that. And again, I'm not saying his is as severe as mine, but it's not anything to scoff at. So while we do have a sigh of relief and we take a deep breath and say, okay, woosah, all that cool stuff, it is still something. There is going to be some level of pain tolerance that he's going to have to play in, I think. At least for right now, when he does finally get that reevaluation and maybe them going through some workouts to see what he can tolerate and what he cannot tolerate.
Right, and part of the discussion online when we were all being Twitter doctors is, okay, maybe it's a hyperextension. And he had a hyperextension one of the years he was with the Clippers, and I think he missed 9 regular season games and then the entire first round of the playoffs, with that knee hyperextension, which again probably sums up to about 3 or 4 weeks. I don't know the time frame specifically, and that's a hyperextended knee. So if we can get anything less than that, again, knock on wood, I think is a blessing because it could have been a lot worse based on what we saw.
Yeah. So my question to you would be, again, all right, you're cool with him sitting out for a while. Do they have enough depth overall to look at this team right now and say that they can withstand his absence with the new pieces that they have? you still have to worry about, because this was one thing that was mentioned with him, at least with him. Yes, when Gina Mizell spoke about it after the game, Inquirer.com, she spoke with him, and one of the things that he talked about with it being so early, still trying to get acclimated with his new teammates, that chemistry and that cohesion, because you don't want to go into things still cold. So it's still very early, and he wants to do that. He's going to miss some valuable time with that, at least right now. Depending on where you are, Roy, right now, at least these other players are going to play with Tyrese Maxey to get that cohesion, to get that familiarity with one another, to at least when the game starts next week, maybe they're in a good spot where they can get through some games, and, of course, all the training camp, these preseason games, where they're ready to go.
Yeah, I think so. And you guys talked about it yesterday. I mean, this is, probably the deepest Sixers team that we've seen, at least in recent memory, as far as, talented bodies that you can put in. Rotation guys. So I feel confident that, again, in the short term, again, the Tyrese Maxey, being the leader of the rest of these guys, for, let's say, 3 or 4 games, as you said. And again, Joel Embiid, we don't know if he's going to be in the mix or not. We don't know yet. So he could be in the mix, but let's assume that he's there, at least half the time. I think that, these guys are talented enough to kind of, hold the fort down until Paul George is ready to, to kind of reacclimate himself to the team. Like, obviously, you want everybody to hit the ground running game one, to build that chemistry, to be ready for April and May. That's not going to happen. That's fine. But I think everybody else can kind of hold the fort down. And again, you have a bunch of professionals on this team now that you didn't have last year.
Right.
You have, the Andre Drummonds, the Eric Gordons, the guys like that who are going to, they're going to show up, they're going to put in, bring the lunch pail and give you their good day's work every single time they come out. You don't have to worry about those guys, right? Those guys are going to be able to play whether or not Paul George or Joel Embiid are there or not. So I feel pretty confident that, the first week of season should be fine until Paul George kind of gets his legs back up under him.
All right, and for tonight's game number 5 against the Brooklyn Nets, no Paul George, as we know, no Joel Embiid, as we already knew, and no Kyle Lowry tonight. Also, Nick Nurse said that pregame. So those 3 are out. As far as this game goes with Paul George, he mentioned on Tuesday after practice that this was going to be a scheduled game off for him anyway, so he wasn't going to play tonight. I don't know if I believe him because everybody else is playing tonight.
No, I figured that he would have either taken off Monday or Wednesday because they usually don't. They're pretty. I
thought
lenient.
2 to 3 games for him. Maybe 1 for Embiid. I thought 2 to 3 games. So, but look, that was part of their schedule. It worked out this way, unfortunately, with the injury. So he's not in there. So we don't get a chance to see Paul George with the team tonight. But we do have the starters for tonight's game against the Brooklyn Nets. And what we have right now is, as usual, at the guard spot is Tyrese Maxey, your all-star. He will be teamed up in the backcourt with Eric Gordon. The wings this evening, Kelly Oubre. No Caleb Martin again in the starting lineup, but KJ Martin gets the nod at the quote-unquote power forward position with Andre Drummond, your starter when Embiid is not available at the 5 spot. So KJ Martin gets the nod. Your initial thoughts on that one, since we did hear Nick Nurse say pregame that he wanted to maybe experiment with some lineups. Yeah,
and the pregame availability, Nick Nurse said that KJ Martin has been, a little bit more confident, a little bit more comfortable, in his role with the Sixers this year. He says he plays kind of a power game at the rim. He's kind of, 6'5", 6'4", 6'5", but he plays a bigger style of game. He plays like a bigger player down there. So I'm curious to see what KJ Martin, he's been pretty good. He was pretty decent in the Atlanta game. I'm curious to see what he's going to do as a starting 4 tonight. Again, that's been my question about this team, and I'll kind of pose it to you. It's like, one of my big questions about this team is, outside of the obvious guys, how are they going to rebound? Like outside of the Drummonds and the Embiids, I have questions about them on the boards, and it's going to be the more active guys are obviously probably going to get the minutes at the 4. Caleb Martin's obviously undersized. KJ Martin's obviously undersized. Gershon Yabusele, he's an energy guy, but he's not necessarily a quote unquote rebounder. Do you think those guys are going to be okay, or the team as a whole is going to be okay on the glass without a quote unquote textbook 4?
Outside of Embiid, of course,
and
as a rebounder, and outside of Drummond, the key for me is to team rebound. Just understanding and knowing the role of, I have to help these guys out and go and get those rebounds, because you're right. Caleb Martin, Kelly Oubre, and Paul George all know that they are not big fours. They are not the traditional power forwards in today's game. They can get away with it because there aren't too many of them in today's association in the first place. But you cannot allow what happened in the New York Knicks series to continually happen, and that's why you go and revamp your entire roster. So with that, I do think they're going to be okay because I believe that one of the things that they pounded on in training camp and now in the preseason is to make sure that you team rebound and not just leave it up to your big fella to go gather that rebound, whether it's Embiid or Drummond or Tyrese Maxey as well, who might swoop in and get you 4 or 5 on any given night. Those guys will be. So to this point, though, for KJ Martin getting a start tonight, Caleb Martin not getting a start for 2 consecutive games to see what it looks like with others in that starting group. This is an interesting one because it does come off of KJ Martin playing a pretty good preseason overall so far. He had a good game the other day on Monday in the win where he did some really nice things, had 2 offensive rebounds that led to a made shot by the Sixers off of his effort, his hustle, and getting those boards and getting an opportunity for Kelly Oubre to hit a mid-range jumper because of his work, his tenacity in going after those rebounds. Right. And the way that he has played and playing bigger than that 6'4", 6'5" frame, I'm okay with it because this is another thing that we've talked about as much as we love Ricky Council. He has had the edge since last season over Ricky in the rotation where Nick Nurse trusts him a little bit more. His ability to put the ball on the floor and finish is a little bit different than Ricky's. The outside shot, both of them don't have a picture-perfect outside shot, but you probably like Ricky a little bit more in that wing to do those things. KJ Martin has shown that whether it's the 3 or the 4 and even sometimes 5, he's going to stick his nose in there and not play at small because of his frame. He's going to play bigger than that frame. So I'm okay with it. I'm okay with also getting a look at it too, Roy, because he is not out there with that backup unit. I do want to see him with some starters out there on the floor. So whether it's helping on the defensive end and helping out Andre Drummond, or on the offensive end, just setting some nice screens, roll to the basket, still an athletic guy who can crash the glass offensively, rotate along the baseline, find an open spot for a pass, finishing at the rim, maybe something with that little push shot that he likes in the paint if he does cut to the middle of the floor. I like that. The one negative is it's another guy who is not known for his offense. So it's Andre Drummond and KJ Martin, where you have Gordon and Kelly Oubre with Tyrese Maxey, 2 of which will create their own shot. Everybody else is heavily reliant on those 2 to get some good looks. So that's where one question goes in. But if everything else takes care of itself with the other intangibles, you probably can get away with it, again, because you have those 2 scorers on the offensive end to at least focus on. Once that double team comes to Tyrese Maxey, Kelly Oubre is going to do his thing and step up that level and feel like he can score a little bit more. So those are some things that stand out to me with KJ Martin in the starting lineup, both positively and negative.
See in the chat, someone, it was a Habib215 says, why not start Yabusele and Caleb Martin? We talked about the Caleb Martin thing, so we'll ignore that for a second. Instead of Eric Gordon. Well, I think instead of Eric Gordon or instead of Eric Gordon, instead of KJ Martin.
So Martin and Yabusele in the lineup, I'm probably for KJ Martin
for KJ
and Eric Gordon.
It's
not a bad idea if you're just trying to get a look.
Would you start Martin and Yabusele together? With Drummond?
Caleb Martin?
Yeah.
Yeah, because because now you're having Kelly basically play the 2 guard.
Right.
And he did a lot of that last season when it was Kyle Lowry, Tyrese Maxey, Kelly Oubre. Right. Sometimes Kelly would play the 2 when one of those guys went out. So I would have been okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I was more thinking about Caleb Martin at the 3 because, I know they brought him in to be a 4. He's undersized at the 4, but he's
I think they're all interchangeable where it doesn't matter. Exactly. It doesn't matter.
So it's all good. I know they've played a lot of Yabusele as a small ball 5 this year. This preseason. He's looked pretty good. He looked really good against the Hawks. He's just that energy guy. I like Yabusele. Like, he's just that energy guy who's going to be like come in and kind of do just pretty much whatever that you want. I think, you know how was it Brett Brown used to say, like, they had like the tournament for like certain guys, like, like certain positions would have a tournament and like all the the backup guys would fight for that spot. I think Yabusele is definitely in that tournament for backup 4, backup 5. Well, not backup 5, but backup 4. Like, who's going to get like a bunch of the backup big man minutes behind Caleb Martin this year because he does a lot of things fairly well.
Yep. And look, again, I wouldn't have had a problem at all. Yes, start Yabusele with Martin over Gordon and KJ Martin, but I think the Gordon piece is to Habib stretch the floor a little bit. Have somebody who can, outside of Maxey, because you know they're going to try to force the basketball out of his hands. So if they run the offense like they're supposed to, when the ball's forced out of his hands, at least when the ball swings, you have a guy who can take a shot 32, 35 feet away from the basket, and you feel comfortable with the look that he does get. And when offensive rebounds are gathered by either Martin or Drummond, and they do find Maxey or Gordon behind the three-point line, you feel comfortable, again, with those two firing it up from beyond the three-point line there. So I'm okay with either one. But as again, Habib, Nick Nurse just wants to see how it looks. I don't think, just guessing, I don't know that Maxey is going to play on Friday night against Orlando. I doubt it. Yeah. And this will probably be our last chance. But it doesn't mean they won't sub for those two, and we'll still get a chance to see how they look at some point in tonight's game. So with that, as we go along, we appreciate everybody checking in. Who are some other players to watch for you in this particular matchup?
Well, he's been getting a bunch of minutes this preseason, but I'm going to look, at Jared McCain. I mean, there's no Kyle Lowry tonight, so I'm going to see. I imagine McCain's going to get a pretty healthy dose of minutes.
He had 9 points on Monday and 14.6 points on average before Monday night.
Okay. All right, yeah. So he's, playing fairly well, shooting a lot better, in preseason than he did in Summer League. So he's probably going to get a pretty decent dose of minutes tonight with Kyle Lowry out. So I would imagine, I want to see, I just want to see how he looks. I want to see how Jared McCain looks, with more opportunities with the ball in his hands, with the more opportunities to score. For me, he's the main guy I'm looking at tonight.
For me, I'll shift to the other guard spot. We haven't seen Reggie Jackson a lot.
Yeah, we haven't. Yeah.
So with Kyle Lowry out, Jared McCain will get some run. How much run will we see of Reggie Jackson also in that role, or even in the Jared McCain role, where they both see some time out there on the floor? So I'm curious to see, because we know Reggie Jackson can score. And if Jared McCain does come into the game and they take Maxey out, we also know that they've tried to pair McCain up with another guard who can take those ball handling responsibilities as a veteran.
Right.
Because we've seen that McCain has had a little bit of trouble trying to get into his sets against these defenses. They're extending the defense against him. They're trying to force some pressure on him. So with that, I wonder if we see a little bit more Reggie Jackson tonight. Also, no Paul George out there to take some of those ball handling responsibilities either. Indeed. So that's where I will go. I'm curious to see if we see any Reggie Jackson tonight with those guys, especially teaming up with Jared McCain to give him another ball handler, because I don't think it's going to be Jeff Doughton. I just don't.
I don't think so either.
I just don't. I think it's, again, it's Jeff Doughton will play on Friday night against the Orlando Magic. But I wonder if it's more Reggie Jackson tonight over Jeff Doughton.
Well, one guy we won't see tonight is Ben Simmons. Habib in the chat.
Yes.
Is Ben Simmons playing? No, he is not.
He is not.
The net starters tonight, Dennis Schroeder, Cam Thomas, Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson, and Noah Clowney. And I apologize, I don't know Noah Clowney that much. Maybe you know a little bit about Noah Clowney.
Well, I'm familiar. He was there last year in Brooklyn. He's just an athletic 6'8", 6'9", athletic guy.
One of the 11 guys they have on that roster, athletic 6'8", 6'9" guy.
He's not Claxton.
Okay.
But he has the frame though of Claxton and not Day'Ron Sharpe. So Sharpe, I don't know if he's playing, but he's not starting. They wanted to give him some run at the 5. He's an okay guy that you can play. Andre Drummond is going to scoop up those rebounds, but he has to be ready. Quick bounce.
Okay.
Clowney has a quick bounce, so he has to be prepared and ready to get up there, and get those boards.
They got a whole bunch of bouncy guys.
They do.
Athletic guys, but none of that translates to wins and losses.
Translates
to losses.
Glad I don't have to worry about that team anymore.
Goodness gracious.
That was some tough watching some nights. Watching that team and hoping, hey, come on, get some wins, man. We got to get to the playoffs because we don't miss the playoffs. But, yeah, so Drummond, all those guys. I guess another one would be Yabusele.
Yeah.
Nick Nurse did talk about Yabusele before the game. You want to see him. Kyle Neubeck asked him pregame about has he seen enough of him at the 4 spot. We have not. He's only seen a little bit from him at the 4. But he has been the primary 5. Roy, do you like that experiment of where things are? Because clearly they don't Adem Bona just has not grabbed a hold of that backup 5 spot.
Yeah, Bona's not the guy.
Not right now.
Yeah, and we probably won't see him in the rotation, this year. But again, you're going to play at least, again, if Joel Embiid is a perfect picture of health, you will see him at the very most 67 times this year because they have 15 back-to-backs. He's probably going to miss a couple games due to little nagging injuries and things like that because it's the NBA. So Joel Embiid is probably going to play 55 to 60 games at most this year, which means you're going to need your backup center to play a lot of minutes, at least 20 times this year. Got to find out who's going to win that backup center tournament. And Yabusele, again, being that energy guy who can play the 4, play the 5, I think don't say he's the perfect guy, but he's a very good, option behind Andre Drummond.
Does it mess up your rotation of what you thought it was going to be and how you wanted to use Yabusele because they are forced to use him at the 5 instead of the 4? The 5 spot might have been a luxury.
Sure.
But now I have to use him as my backup when Embiid is not there.
Yeah, but I think we kind of knew that Embiid wasn't going to put in the 82 this year.
Yeah, but some thought that Bona might be good enough to be the backup to Drummond.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Or you were already there with Yabusele at the backup 5?
No, I was already there. I know that the backup 5 was going to be somewhat of a question because Joel Embiid's not going to play all year. So,
and the question shifted this way instead of the other way with Bona.
Right.
Okay, fair enough. All right, let's get to our Bet365 best bets of the night yet again for preseason. I think we got, Bree, did we get 3 or 4 the last game? Or no, Paul George got injured, so he didn't reach his 15 points.
Okay.
And then what was the other one that Maxey missed a 3-pointer by 1. I had him and Trae Young in a parlay.
You had really low odds too.
It's the preseason, man. I don't know how many minutes they're playing. I have no idea.
Preseason crapshoot.
So when Bree and I were talking about this, I was like, all right, let me go. And so Trae Young hit his 2+. He hit his 2.
He hit the 2.
And Maxey missed 1, but he went 2 for 9. So he should have gotten there. He did not. And then Paul George got injured. Not his fault. That's on me, Paul. I shouldn't have made that bet.
And that's all right.
And then I think the other one we also hit on. So for tonight, here are our best bets. Roy is going cold. He doesn't know. So let's start off with the same game parlay. Plus 240, Roy. Tyrese Maxey, I'm going back to the well. 3 threes. Tonight, he's going to get a lot of shots because, hey, Paul George is not there. Kelly Oubre is going to take some from him. But I'm going again with Tyrese Maxey, 3 threes made tonight or more. And Andre Drummond to hit that 10 rebound plateau or more because we know he gobbles up those rebounds. That's the same game parlay, plus 240. How did I do, Roy?
You did all right because, again, 2 for 9. Tyrese has a little bit something to prove tonight. Like, you know what? I got to come back.
Paul George not playing.
I got to let the people know that – I got to let Devon know that he can believe in me.
Thank you, Tyrese.
This season. So,
thank you.
Tyrese Maxey, 3 threes tonight. Andre Drummond, again, against this Nets front line. No Ben Simmons to vacuum up rebounds. 10 rebounds. I like it.
All right, so – I like that parlay right there. Let's go to the individual. Let's go to the net side. I had to replace one because I did have Ben Simmons. I thought he was going to play, but he didn't. 5+ assists. I thought he would get that tonight. He's not playing. I'm going where I know. I've seen Cam Thomas a lot.
You've seen it.
15 points at minus 220. It's a low odd. Again, I didn't want to go too far simply because it's the preseason.
Yeah, you never know.
I don't know, but what I do know is that guy will squeeze off some shots.
He's going to squeeze off some shots.
Now, how efficient will he be? I don't know.
You know what?
But he will get 15 points.
That bet has nothing to do with efficiency. Whether you score 15 on 5 shots or 15 on 15 shots, still get paid.
He will fire them up, man. I'm telling you, just watching him. We all knew it from the LSU days, but having to watch him closely over the last season and a half, that guy will get off some shots. Frustratingly enough, he will get off some shots, even when I think he should pass the basketball. That's minus 220. And then our final one, Kelly Oubre gets the start. No Paul George in there. And we always talk about that irrational confidence.
Absolutely.
When it comes to certain guys. It's not an irrational confidence when it comes to Kelly Oubre. Kelly Oubre believes he's an all-star, and he's going to approach tonight's matchup as a number 2 scoring option on the offensive end behind Tyrese Maxey.
Yes, sir.
I only went with 10. But I know he's going to do more than that because he is Kelly Oubre. How did I do?
I think you did all right. Like I have to give you some credit because we have the president of the Kelly Oubre fan club, Bree, right behind the camera.
Yes, she is.
And she pushed you. I know.
And Phil W, who's his agent in our chat all the time.
I know she probably pushed you for 15, but you were like, this is preseason. You got to be smart.
Preseason.
You got to be smart. So Kelly Oubre 10 is a very reasonable bet. Next week against Milwaukee, maybe it's a little bit different. But next week, this right now, preseason, Kelly Oubre.
Regular season is a totally different animal.
Different monster.
Totally different monster, as Roy says. We'll get to that next week. So again, our best bets, Bree, one more time. Overall for Bet365, if you want to parlay those, you can put those together. Maxey, 3 threes. Andre Drummond, 10+ rebounds. Cam Thomas over 15 points, and Kelly Oubre 10 or more points scored. If you want to combine those for a parlay altogether, make sure you do so with our friends and our presenting sponsor here for that segment, and that is Bet365. Roy, before we step away, how do you feel about tonight's matchup in this one? You're not worried about wins necessarily, but they are 2-2. You like to get some W's, feel good about everything that happened. Quickly, your thoughts? tonight's matchup?
Yeah, just about. I think everybody's tonight is about learning different roles. Experimentation. And Nick Nurse talked about that in the pregame availability. Let's see how Yabusele looks at the 4. Let's see what Jared McCain does. In a more prominent position off the bench. And let's see what Caleb Martin does in his spot. I think it's just about because again, these are going to be roles that these guys are going to have to play at some point this season. So why not learn that now?
With the shuffling of some of these, we've talked about it before that some of these lineups will change matchup dependent with the opponent. Nick Nurse is experimenting right now. Still some questions out there. Maybe we'll get some answers in potentially the final game for a lot of these players. For Roy Burton, Brianna, I'm Devon. We'll be back after the game for our post-game show right here on the PHLY Sixers Network. Thanks to everybody for hanging out. We've been presented by Coors Light and, of course, Bet365 with the segment. We'll talk about the Sixers Nets post-game right here on the PHLY Sixers podcast. See you then.
We all silly like the mayor.